Hello and welcome to Prep Playbook. I'm Jim Rapier, HSSN Managing Producer at NOLA.com and at the Times-Picayune. Week 2 of the prep football season is in the books, and on this week's show, we'll be looking back at some of the past week's action and ahead to some of the games in Week 3. Also, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune prep sports writer Josh Preston is here to give some analysis and provide some scouting reports for some of next week's games. In a moment, I'll welcome Josh into the studio and we'll look at some of the highlights as we review last week's games. Don't go away. Josh, Week 2 did not disappoint in terms of exciting games and impressive performances, did it?
No question. Great games, great players making some really big plays as always, and of course we'll start with the biggest game of the week.
The big game of the week was Rummel versus Hahnville, and two-time defending champ Rummel goes 3 overtimes to get past a rapidly improving Hahnville team 37-31. The teams ended regulation tied at 24, didn't score in the first overtime, traded touchdowns in the second, and when Hahnville didn't score in the third, Rummel's Brandon Phillips provided the winning touchdown to end it. Fans are probably still catching their breath on this one, right Josh?
No question. I'm still catching my breath just reading the gamer, and Brandon Phillips made some really big plays in the game, expecting a lot from him with Israel Tucker going down. He's also really good on defense, is starting safety, and he can make some plays in the open field on both sides of the ball.
This game went back and forth, a lot of good defense, a lot of good offense, very opportunistic play. But speaking of the play and how hard they're playing, are you surprised at how quickly Hahnville has shown progress under new coach Nick Salter from Agia?
Not necessarily. After seeing them in a jamboree, they look really good, really disciplined, and Mike Neal's a very good quarterback for those guys. He can get the ball down the field when he needs to, and obviously he's got Georgia Tech commit Brandon Singleton out there, and Ricky Preston is a really good back, and expecting a lot from him this year.
And Salt, of course, has been known to field pretty rugged defenses and everything. I know what Hahnville has on the offensive side, but they're showing a lot with their defense, aren't they?
Definitely. Dwayne Thomas, linebacker, just committed to ULF a week or so ago. He's a really big time player on that side, and they can definitely shut some guys down.
And the folks were treated to a whole bunch of extra football in this one and everything, but let's move on to our next game. Josh, the Newman-Riverdale game featured some standout players in the Greenies' Kendall Bussey and Riverdale's Dante Jackson, to name a few, and Newman prevailed 52-33. Bussey scored 5 touchdowns. What's your take on that one?
Kendall Bussey is just a great player. He's a really explosive, compact, kind of back. He can break tackles, shake guys, and he's got speed to break away, as you'll see in these highlights. And
Dante Jackson, as showing right now, breakaway speed. A lot of teams taking notice at the college level of this young man at Riverdale. And Bussey is about to put a stellar move on a screen pass here. This is the kind of stuff that had Nebraska wanting him as badly as they did.
No question. He's, as you said, he's a Nebraska commit, and they're obviously happy to have him. Someone's going to be really, really happy to get Riverdale's Dante Jackson. He's a very fluid athlete, explosive, can make big plays, and you can check out some of their practice highlights from the spring game. Coach Brett Bonifants is doing a great job.
And Newman being a smaller school and everything, in terms of depth, they were able to hang with a larger school here. What does that say about the Greenies moving forward?
I think Newman was a little bit more experienced in this game, especially with quarterback Jabari Tyler back, and he obviously played an integral role even though he didn't start the game.
And he's not just a passing threat, as evidenced by this highlight here. He can also take off and run with the ball.
Right. A threat inside and outside of the pocket just makes it so much harder for defenses to keep track, especially with Bussey next to him.
And Newman was actually able to pull away in this game. Riverdale kept it close. They've got some athletes on their side of the ball as well. And Tyler and Bussey just proved too much offense when all was said and done.
Right. Just too many big plays. They also have a really good receiver, Tyler Addison, out there. And, Darius Bovey for Riverdale also had a really good game, and he's a guy to keep an eye on.
A couple other games with some standout play featured Carr defeating St. Augustine 25-19 and Brother Martin getting past Errett 33-24. Josh, there's nothing like a quality win against a quality opponent, and that's just what happened in these two contests.
No doubt. Carr and St. Aug, it was a great game. It was a little bit sloppy at times. They combined for 9 turnovers and almost 20 penalties, but some really great athletes on the field. This play right here by Michael Connor was maybe the biggest play of the game. St. Aug tried a reverse pass right towards the end of the half, and as you can see, Connor stepped in front of it and pick 6.
The amount of athletes on the field here, the back and forth was incredible. What stood out to you most of all in this game?
I probably have to say, honestly, the turnovers. I mean, both teams, obviously it's early in the season, you'll have some mistakes, but obviously both teams will want to cut down on those. Justice had kind of a rough outing, but he's a really good player. He's one of the good sophomore quarterbacks around it, as is Alden Clark.
And Alden Clark, of course, taking over the role that two different players had last year for Carr, he has stepped in and provided a real spark for the Cougars.
Right. He finished 16 of 22. He did have a couple of interceptions, but he was very efficient. Found a lot of guys short, and he was pretty good making his reads, and he protected the ball for the most part. They have a fumble.
And here we see the winning touchdown for the Carr Cougars, and they held off St. Aug at the end and won 25-19. Turning to Brother Martin, of course, had a really nice win against an Arrett team that is coming off a great season, last year, and a quality win for Brother Martin against the Patriots. What did you like about that game from the Crusaders' point of view?
Yeah, those two backs, Bruce Jordan Swilling and Jared West, those two are just one of the best duos in the state. Not too many guys are going to be able to contend with them, and that was the case again, even with Arrett's good defense.
And Arrett, of course, they don't have Darrell Williams anymore. He's up at LSU in Baton Rouge, but Arrett still provided enough offense to keep up with Brother Martin for a little while, but in the end, just too much offensive firepower for the Crusaders.
Right. Karan Bayham, the quarterback for Arrett, I think he's more of a dual threat. I think he's going to like to get his yards on the ground. Had a really big run to kind of pull him back close, but I think that's pretty much where they're going to go. They have to kind of keep it on the ground.
Well, Josh, Destrehan keeps rolling in terms of keeping it on the ground or in the air or whatever way they want to do it. They defeated Helen Cox 48-7. Is there any stopping the Wildcats?
Not that I can see. I mean, you mentioned Will Matthews, and they've got a ton of receivers out there. Alfred Smith is already committed. Kirk Merritt was the Nike Spark Champion opening, the Spark Champion, and John Williams, he's the one that impresses me most whenever I get to see him. He just makes play after play. There he is right there.
A lot of speed on the field for the Wildcats, and Darrensburg at quarterback, no problem getting his playmakers the football in space when needed.
Right. Darrensburg is one of those sophomore quarterbacks I was mentioning. You can see he's got really good touch on his deep ball, and he can get outside of the pocket and make some things happen, and I'm really interested to see how he develops.
And there we see a zone read, and it just opened up right up the middle there, and Destrehan just, again, like we said, rolled 48-7 over Cox. Okay, Josh, let's change speeds. Let's take a look ahead to a few games in Week 3. Let's start with a huge matchup between defending state champions in Rummel and Acadiana. What do you think?
Huge matchup. Both of these teams are obviously going to want to keep it on the ground, ball control, keep it out of the other team's hands, and it's really this game is probably going to be one in the trenches. So that's what I'm expecting from that one.
Last year they played against each other. Rummel gave Acadiana a huge game in Acadiana, and Acadiana was able to pull away in the end and win. But of course, Rummel has got a ton of offense, and they're a different team once Chase Forquet took over quarterback last year and provides a running in passing threat. And of course, Acadiana with that unbelievable rushing attack off of the base option, and the Rummel defense is definitely going to be tested.
Right. They've got some guys to stand up to the test. Briston Guidry and Tyrell Jacobs in the middle. Tyrell's committed to Oklahoma. Briston Guidry is going to have a ton of big time offers, so I think they'll be fine on that side. But it will be a challenge, no question.
Now, speaking of teams that run an option offense, veer option offense if you want, and wins games in the trenches, let's talk John Curtis. They're coming off an impressive victory against Lufkin, Texas, and now gets an East St. John team looking to pull an upset.
Right. East St. John, they kind of took it on the chin the first week against Rummel, but they definitely bounced back against Scotlandville, and I'm expecting a much better game from those guys.
And in terms of the talent that'll be on the field there, you got players like Dante Jones, Xavier Lewis, and Curtis is just going to do what they do, but a lot of athleticism, on the side of the field for East St. John.
Right, East St. John, you've got Xavier Lewis, as you mentioned, committed to LSU, and for Curtis on the defensive side, Hunter Dell, he's a really good defensive back, had an interception in one of these first two games, and he's a great athlete.
A couple local teams will face a couple teams from Baton Rouge in these next two matchups, which is Jesuit against Central and Destrehan facing Dutchtown. Josh, what's your take?
Jesuit is a really fun team to watch. I think Foster Moreau is one of the better tight ends in the state. I'm hoping, I don't think he has any offers as of yet, but him and Trey LaForge, they have a really good connection going, and I expect big things from those two. And
of course, LaForge is really good at distributing the ball for the Blue Jays and everything, and they'll be going against Central, which is going to have some athleticism and everything. And moving to the other game we were talking about, Dutchtown versus Destrehan. Destrehan, as we mentioned with those highlights, just has so many standouts offensively. There's a look at two of them on the screen right now. Well, how do you like this matchup?
Yeah, Dutchtown's going to want to try to keep it on the ground and keep it away from Destrehan in that explosive offense. We have Will Matthews shown right there. He is a really powerful back, a lot like Kendall Bussey, maybe not quite the breakaway speed, but he's a great back, and I love watching him put on a lot of muscle this offseason, and he is running through tackles like nobody's business.
And last but certainly not least, we have Hahnville and Landry Walker squaring off and Brother Martin going on the road against Franklinton. This looks like two interesting pairings.
No question. The Hahnville-Landry Walker game is going to be a really interesting matchup. Landry Walker's going to try to air it out a little bit more, I would think. And, you know, Hahnville is obviously going to keep it on the ground with the triple option attack, so it's going to be a pretty physical game from that standpoint.
And in terms of quarterback at Landry Walker, they rotate a little bit, but what do you like there?
Right. LeJean Cordier and Keaton Thompson is, again, another one of those sophomores that I was mentioning. He can really throw and get the ball downfield. LeJean Cordier, he keeps it on the ground a little bit more, but both of those guys can get the job done.
And in terms of Brother Martin, you got, as you said, the two-headed monster at running back and everything, which ought to be interesting going against a Franklinton team, which has been getting it done offensively as well as defensively.
Yeah, and you know, even for Brother Martin, even on the outside, they have Jeremy Singleton, who is a deep threat, and he can get behind some guys. And you know, you'll want to see some big plays from him as well.
Thanks, Josh. It seems the fans have a lot to look forward to this week.
No question. Can't wait.
And don't forget, you can follow all of Josh's work as well as all of our writers at highschoolsports.NOLA.com. Well, that's all for this edition of Prep Playbook. For Josh Preston, I'm Jim Rapier. Thanks for clicking on us. We'll see you again next week.